Hello and welcome to episode 4 of The Franchise. I am your host, Daniel Ehrenberg.
I'm your co-host, Henry Papali. Welcome.
And today, we'll be talking about a new franchise. We completed Die Hard last week. And if you thought A Good Day to Die Hard was going to be the worst movie we talk about on this podcast... Well, today we're talking about the Basic Instinct series, and there's a little movie called Basic Instinct 2. It's got kind of a title like that Die Hard 2 Die Harder, where some places you look at a certain thing.
See, I didn't see that.
Really?
I didn't see that anywhere.
Sometimes it's Basic Instinct 2 Risk Addiction.
Oh, wow. I didn't see that at all.
And you know that when you watch the movie because Sharon Stone says the words risk and risk addiction about 1,000 times.
Yes, she does. As does the governor. He says it quite a few times, too.
The governor. Well, you'll do your superhero count.
Oh, yeah, I have one.
Yeah. But first, we're talking about the first one.
Yep.
We're going to nab this entire franchise this week because there's only 2 of these bad boys.
Yep.
The first thing here is Basic Instinct from 1992, directed by Paul Verhoeven, and written by Joe Eszterhas, a couple of Eastern Europeans making an erotic thriller taking place in San Francisco.
A Dutchman and a Hungarian.
That's right. This flick was released March 20th, 1992. It's in that space between the Oscar films and the big budget Hollywood blockbuster summer movies.
That's a good point.
Yeah, trying to get like sort of an alt or audience, like trying to get them in the months where there's not that much coming out. Now shit comes out year round. This March they released, Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice.
Yeah.
But I say that with such hatred in my voice every time.
Yeah. Right. Sure.
But this back then, not a lot was going on in March. So I don't want to say this was a surprise hit because this is a director coming off of Total Recall and RoboCop.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
But it was definitely I think it overperformed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean it made what $350 million on a $50 million budget or something like that.
Yeah. $49 million budget, $352.9 million at the box office. So this
Pretty
was
big.
Yeah, that's a big hit, dude.
Yeah.
Especially for a movie starring Michael Douglas. Not at the height of his career.
Well, he did have Fatal Attraction was a massive monster hit, and Wall Street he won an Oscar for. So.
Oh, I guess that's true. Yeah. So he was still big, but
he's the big part of the movie that would be marketable. That's about it.
Sharon Stone was a nobody, though.
She was a nobody.
Should have stayed that way.
We'll get into that. She was a Verhoeven one on Total Recall. She had that minor role in there.
Yeah, but Verhoeven didn't want her for this movie, right?
Right.
He wanted a name. I think like Demi Moore was the
Oh
name
my
that
God,
was
there were
floating around.
so many people that he wanted. The list was gigantic.
Yeah, I saw that list on Wikipedia.
Yeah. Did you think it was not accurate?
Yeah, I think a lot of that's bullshit. I mean, I did a Survivor podcast before this one, and you'd see lists of people that it was like, this person was considered to be brought back for this season.
Right.
And it's just the person was on a podcast and was like, I was considered. They talked to me.
And then it falls into Wikipedia-dom.
Yeah. I think a lot of it's bullshit, but I've always heard Demi Moore's name floating around for this movie, so... how many times had you seen this movie before, Henry? Because this is a movie that seems like up your alley.
Yeah.
Because you're gross.
Right, that's why.
I'm joking.
Yeah.
No, because you're a big Michael Douglas fan.
Yeah. But I didn't really get into this movie until I'd say in college, so probably a good 10 years or so after it was out. And I just really dug. I was in that whole, I love those cop thrillers. and like from the 80s and stuff. And so that's kind of what got me into it. And like and it's the weird thing about it is I knew it was Paul Verhoeven, but it never really made the connection because it's in certain ways so much Paul Verhoeven, but it's very different obviously than Total Recall. So I never thought of it like, oh, this is a Paul Verhoeven movie. It was much more like just, this is a cool Michael Douglas cop thriller, like in the vein of Black Rain or something like that. Even though they couldn't possibly be, more different. But yeah, so basically, I've seen this movie a whole bunch of times because I had it on video, and then when I got a DVD player for the first time in 2003, it was one of the first DVDs I got, along with a couple of clunkers. But yeah, so I've seen the movie a lot. I'm pretty familiar with it.
My first DVD was Mallrats.
That makes sense for you.
I think that shows my exact age.
Yeah. You know why Mallrats was your first DVD?
I'd heard good things about the commentary track. That's the real answer. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say because you're gross.
Yeah.
No,
yeah, there's a lot of cum flying around in that movie too.
Yeah, right. I always liked this movie a lot, and then I will get to it at some point. But I was looking at actually I just did this before we started this podcast today. I was curious about like Michael Douglas's kind of career trajectory.
Sure.
And it was pretty amazing, except for the entire decade of the 2000 to 2009.
What, you're not a fan of It Runs in the Family?
Oh my God! Like he really took a nosedive, but up until
he took a nosedive right into Catherine Zeta-Jones's
or Sharon Stone's. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, Sharon Stone fucked everybody involved in Basic Instinct.
Yeah. Well, I want to hear about that because I'm not. You're the Joe Esterhaas expert. But,
I sure am. I have read 2 books by Joe Esterhaas. That's crazy.
That is crazy. But can I just read you a real quick filmography of it's selective, but it's accurate, of Michael Douglas from like 1987 to 2000. Can I just do that real quick?
The Jewel of the Nile.
No, I was going to skip that, but
okay.
we can go. That was a hit.
No, we'll talk about that on a later episode.
Right. It's not one of my favorite movies, but yeah, at all. But okay. So in 87, this guy does Fatal Attraction. In the same year, he does Wall Street. Those are back-to-back movies. Right after that, he does Black Rain, one of my all-time favorite movies, as you know.
Yeah.
He follows that with War of the Roses, one of your favorite movies.
It is, yeah.
Then he took a 3-year break with nothing, and he did the mediocre Shining Through.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, and then in the same year, he did Basic Instinct. Then he did Falling Down.
Love it.
Then Disclosure.
Ugh.
Then The American President.
Are you reading these to me like they're good movies?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm reading them to you in a mixture of like just interest and some are very good. Like I think Basic Instinct and Falling Down are great.
Oh, I agree with at least Falling Down.
And Disclosure I like.
That's a horrible movie. Go back and watch it.
And American President was a big fan favorite. I could, it's fine. I could do without it. Then he did the horrendous Ghost in the Darkness.
That's not a bad movie.
Yeah. Okay.
I own it on DVD.
Really?
Yep.
I am stunned that you own that. That is not a Daniel pick. And then he did The Game.
I love that movie.
Followed by A Perfect Murder, which was a serviceable thriller. And then Wonder Boys and Traffic. And then he goes 9 years with basically junk.
So that was Traffic. That was the end of his run.
Yeah, but that's a long run, man.
That's some good movies. Been a lot of good movies. Yeah, Wonder Boys, really underrated. Traffic's obviously great.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a good career. But I have a theory about Michael Douglas that I will posit later in this episode.
Oh, I want to hear it. Yeah. All right. So.
I've got a barnstorming fact about my relationship to Basic Instinct that I didn't realize until watching it this time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd only seen Basic Instinct once.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yes. I watched Basic Instinct when I was 13 years old because I loved Starship Troopers. And I was trying to see the rest of Paul Verhoeven's catalog.
Sure.
And you say this is a departure for Paul Verhoeven, and it is, but it's also probably the only erotic thriller to have in the opening credits a credit for like special makeup by, like, because there's some weirdly gory scenes where all of a sudden Basic Instinct turns into Total Recall.
Yeah, you're right. I did notice that credit, and I didn't really. It kind of went over my head, but now you say, like, why would this have a makeup?
Yeah. Also, it's got that scene that takes place when they go out to the club, and it's so unrealistic. It might as well be on Mars. So that's in Paul Verhoeven's wheelhouse as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I saw this movie, and what I didn't realize until watching it this time was I watched Basic Instinct on basic cable.
That was the only time you'd seen it?
I hadn't seen Basic Instinct with sex in it until 2 days ago.
Well, I was just going to say, besides the copious amounts of sex, there's like a lot of swearing and a lot of violence.
Yeah.
You saw nothing.
I saw a cut to shit version of this film.
Oh.
And so
Wow.
I'm really watching it with fresh eyes.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, I'll throw this in there. I do remember when the movie came out. You're too young to remember. But I remember when it came out. I was like in...
I was young, but I was already paying attention to movies. And I do remember this movie being a big deal.
Yeah, like I was in the 8th or 9th grade. And I just remember it being like this huge big deal because of all the explicit sex and all that. And
I remember being like 8 years old and knowing this movie as the movie where Sharon Stone shows her puss.
Right.
Probably not in those terms at that point.
I don't think they said that on Good Morning America. Yeah.
Oh, GMA?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think of the Good Morning America people.
I don't think her vulva was discussed in that context, but it was certainly discussed. And she didn't. To her credit, she didn't know they were going to do the shot.
Yes, she did.
Yeah,
that was a joke, right?
Yes.
Because that shot is actually a beautiful looking shot. Like
the whole movie is beautiful.
So much time was spent on camera placement and movement
you're right.
and lighting in that shot. She knew exactly what was happening. Fuck you, Sharon Stone.
That whole scene is actually. I mean, it just goes in line with the choreography of that scene, the setup. And John DeBont, our man, is back.
Yeah, it's true. This has a weird Die Hard connection.
Yeah, it does.
Because
it is a beautiful looking movie. Like I was even noticing, like in some of the shot, because as usual when I watch this, with the critical eye, very different, And I was noticing like shots of the vistas of like the houses and the streets of San Francisco. Michael Douglas reference.
Nice.
Thank you. It's a beautiful looking movie. I mean, it really is a gorgeously shot film.
Well,
and so there's no way that setup scene, that the setups for that scene were not planned, talked about. I mean, there's just no way, Sharon. There's no way.
Everything was planned in this movie. I mean, it has a very specific look to it. It's clearly as much Paul Verhoeven's tribute to Alfred Hitchcock as like Brian De Palma's entire career was.
Yeah, for sure.
And yeah, I mean that's what it is. The score sounds like fucking Bernard Herrmann.
Oh, I have so many notes on Jerry Goldsmith.
It's great. It's a great score.
It's one of the best.
Nominated for an Oscar, right?
Yep.
And editing as well, which probably deserving also. It's a really good movie. I have problems with Basic Instinct, but I have nothing bad to say about the visual aesthetic of it. Or
and really, this the score. I mean, Jerry Goldsmith, his filmography, it's so ridiculously long that it would take an entire show to go through every one of them. But this guy is really, he's a king of Hollywood score. I mean, he is just, he's amazing. I mean, this is the guy who did Alien, and he did some of the Star Trek movies, and they're not.
He's a contender for like Mount Rushmore, right?
Absolutely,
with like Ennio Morricone and John Williams.
Absolutely, he is to be in that same conversation. He is phenomenal, and he himself, I read a quote, said that he thought this was one of his best scores. And I think one of the hardest scores he probably ever had to write, because you got this kind of old school Hollywood composer thrown into this bizarre world of Paul Verhoeven and Joe Esterhazy.
But it's also perfect because while it's a very 1990s film, like, it is trying to ape Hitchcock. And so while it's very sexy and there's a lot of nudity and violence and swearing, it's also trying to feel Hitchcockian. And so Jerry Goldsmith has probably the job of trying to old-fashionedize this film that is very modern.
Yeah, and did you notice how prominent the score is? It's not a movie that you would think music is constantly playing, but it almost always is playing, and it's not distracting. It's one of those few movies out there that you're watching and the music is happening, and it's just, the cues are just great, and it's just kind of continuous, but it's always interesting. So that's Jerry Goldsmith.
He's great. Let's talk about the creation of this film, because this is a screenplay that I believe at the time held the record for the most money that was ever shelled out for a screenplay.
That sounds right.
It was bought for $3 million by Coralco. And that's the reason, or one of the many reasons, Coralco did not make it out of the 90s.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, they went bankrupt real bad.
Yeah.
So it was written by this fella, Joe Esterhazy.
This fella.
He got his start with Flashdance.
Yep.
And that would go on to be the only screenplay he wrote that wasn't totally gross.
He wrote Jagged Edge.
That's pretty gross, too.
Jagged Edge?
I've never seen it, but I assume.
Oh, no. I've seen it.
But he wrote Jade.
Yep, Sliver.
Yeah, Showgirls.
Yeah.
He was actually paid $1.5 million for a 2-page outline of Jade.
I read that.
That's how big Joe Esterhazy was at the time. And then ultimately in the late 90s, he wrote an Alan Smithy film, Burn Hollywood Burn.
Right.
And that tanked so bad that it kind of killed his career and he was never able to recover. But there was a time when Joe Esterhazy was the hottest screenwriter in Hollywood. Like probably him and Shane Black, right? And maybe Tarantino even.
Shane Black, really?
Yeah, well, he wrote Lethal Weapon. I think he broke the record. Like, he broke Basic Instinct's record for the most money paid for a screenplay. Like, I think he got like $5 million for The Long Kiss Goodnight.
Is that right?
Yeah,
wow.
Something like that.
I didn't know that.
So Joe Esterhazy signs on board this movie with Paul Verhoeven and Michael Douglas. So you got a trio of smarmy. And they open up that casting couch that we love to talk about on this show.
Love the casting
This
couch.
is the early 90s, so Hollywood's still disgusting.
All right.
It just reeks of dry semen.
And let's hear about your Joe Esterhazy stories here. Let's go.
Well, I
guess you're heading there.
I've read multiple books by Joe Esterhazy. One was his memoir, and the other was a book about the Bill Clinton Monica Lewinsky sex scandal.
Really?
Yes, he wrote a horrible book about that called American Rhapsody. But it's worth reading because there's one long chapter written from the perspective of Bill Clinton's penis.
Get out of here.
I swear to you.
I have no response to that. I don't even know how.
book that exists. It was published and is written by Joe Eszterhas.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I thought he was a sleaze before, and I didn't find that out. Wow.
He's a total sleaze. I mean, this is the guy who tried to resurrect his career years later by writing a film for Mel Gibson to direct about the Maccabees.
That's right. I read all about that.
Yeah. And when that didn't get made, he of course wrote a book about it. Which by that point he couldn't get things published anymore. I believe it's available on Kindle, like self-published.
You know your career's going poorly when you were the highest paid screenwriter in Hollywood, and now you're just kind of publishing things like college students have to.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah, he's publishing things like, people who publish Twilight fan fiction.
Yeah, that's sad. Can I tell you something real quick about him that you may not know that comes from my obscure knowledge of bizarre classical music references?
Go ahead.
This is very strange. The name Eszterhas, and I'm sure, knowing this guy as I do, I'm sure he played this up throughout his life, but he is a descendant of the Esterhazy dynasty. Now, who they were the princes and kings in the time of Beethoven and Haydn, and they were the reason that Haydn had an entire long career. So Nicholas Esterhazy, Joe Eszterhas's distant great something, was Joseph Haydn's employer. And Beethoven dedicated several works to the Esterhazy family.
Yeah, I knew that because he talks about it at length in his memoir.
I knew it.
In a braggy way.
I knew he would.
Yeah, but worth mentioning for sure.
Yeah.
So they decide they're going to get an unknown to be in this movie. And
Well, I'm glad we're heading this way because I want to get into the casting too. I wrote a lot of notes about the casting. Nothing about Sharon Stone. I was going to leave all that to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's Sharon Stone. They go with her, and I mean, according to Joe Eszterhas's book, she just fucked everyone in sight to get this role.
Mm-hmm.
And even after getting the role. And he has a story about being in a room with Paul Verhoeven, and he's, I believe, lying on the floor for some reason. It's like a brainstorming sesh, and she just sort of walks in and like sits on his dick and starts fucking him.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that's in his memoir. And
Now, do you believe that?
yeah, I kind of do. I mean, because it's so braggy to the point where like he's probably exaggerating, but I get the sense that Sharon Stone... I mean... Sharon Stone's the type of person, if someone says something libelous about her, she's going to take that opportunity to come out into the press and deny it.
Right.
But I think she probably did have sex with both Paul Verhoeven and Joe Eszterhas on this film.
Mm-hmm.
And then she probably never needed to again because this movie launched her career and she kind of was a big movie star for a minute.
Yeah, she was. Yeah.
No,
not for more than a minute. I'd say for the remainder of the 90s.
What were her other hits?
Well, I'm not saying they're hits. I'm just.
What were her other big movies?
Well, she got the leading role in Sliver, which was pretty much a disaster, I believe. But she got it was a Sharon Stone movie. It wasn't somebody else's movie. I remember when she was in Casino.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
She got an Oscar nod for that, and then wasn't she in that movie?
Somebody in the Academy. She got a Golden Globe nomination for Basic Instinct, and the Hollywood Foreign Press Association is the largest known collection of smarmy weirdos on the planet. So something had to happen there too.
Yeah,
not to like denigrate. I'm not trying to be like a misogynist about this, but these are known things about Sharon Stone.
You're not coming across as a misogynist, but you're coming across that you definitely don't have any love for Sharon Stone.
No, and you know why? She's not a good actor.
I agree. I have always thought that. I didn't even think in Casino. I think she's good, but it was never a role that I was like, God, that's such a great role for Sharon Stone.
Yeah, but then 2 years later, L.A. Confidential comes out, and you're like, man, Kim Basinger should have been in Casino.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sharon Stone gets by in the first film purely on. She does have charisma.
Yeah.
And she is pretty hot. Though, let's not pretend she's hotter than Jeanne Tripplehorn.
Oh, thank you, Lord, for saying that. I thought I was going to have to be the one to say that.
No, Jeanne Tripplehorn at the top of her game.
Oh my God! I don't want to turn this like into the Howard Stern show, but Jeanne Tripplehorn is so sexy and effortlessly sexy. Like Sharon Stone is like everything's like every line is delivered like she's trying to be, like Betty Davis.
Well, I do think that it partly is the direction, because she's supposed. I mean, this is like, aside from being a Hitchcock homage, it's also sort of like a Raymond Chandler kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And
yeah.
so she is playing like the femme fatale.
Yeah.
And I think that works for me. Like, that's why she's delivering her lines like that. So I don't want to like shit on Sharon Stone for that too much, but Jeanne Tripplehorn is amazing in this movie.
And it's her first movie. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. And she's also a very good actor.
She
has gone on to have a good career.
She has. Yeah. But this was her first movie. I didn't know that. Because I remember her, in The Firm, and
Till There Was You.
No, I don't remember that.
Was that her? Did I make?
It could have been, sure.
Yeah.
And Waterworld.
She's in that.
Yeah,
oh, she's the girl in that.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that since theaters, dude.
I didn't see it in the theater.
I wish that had a sequel so we could cover it.
That would be amazing. But she's so good in this movie, and she's just excellent, and it brings me a little bit to the casting. If I could just talk about that for a second.
Well, can I
please,
set it up? I want to
Please.
say that I just think that Hollywood was kind of flush with great character actors in the late 80s and early 90s. We talked about this in those first few Die Hards.
Yes.
And I mean, go on, talk about it, but like, I mean, whenever this movie threatens to become like just a classless junk pile, which it does a couple times, there's someone right around the corner like Stephen Tobolowsky to like lend it some class.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into classless junk pile when we talk about what happened.
Basic Instinct 2?
Yeah. No, I mean, we've got, as Michael Douglas's partner, we've got the great character actor George DeZunda.
Is that how you pronounce that?
DeZunda, yeah.
I've always said Zunza.
No, I think it's DeZunda. I think it's Hungarian, so I think the D is like Dvorak or like Czechoslovakian, like DeZunda. Yeah. I don't know. Anyway.
And he's a guy.
He's in Deer Hunter.
He was one of the detectives. He was Chris Noth's partner on the first season of Law and Order.
I saw that.
And I watched the first season of Law and Order pretty recently. And he's awesome in it. Like, he and Chris Noth are a great pair.
Mm-hmm.
And he left Law and Order after the first season because he thought that the show was going to be more character-centric.
Oh.
And it turned out they went the route of, like, ripped from the headlines, procedural stuff.
Oh, okay.
And he wasn't interested in that. And so he left Law and Order. They killed him off screen in actually a really good episode. If you want to see a good episode of TV, watch that season 2 premiere of Law and Order. But the first thing he did after Law and Order was Basic Instinct, where he's playing a police detective in a crime procedural. Basically playing the exact character he plays in Law and Order.
Yeah.
And gets killed off.
Right, that's funny.
I don't understand. It's the exact same thing we were talking about with William Atherton a couple episodes ago, where he turns down Mallrats because it's too childish, and then goes off to do Biodome.
Well, it's not quite the same thing.
But he's leaving a show because it's not challenging to him, and then goes on to do a movie where he's doing the exact same thing.
I know, but the movies, I mean, he Biodome, Basic Instinct. I mean, I get your point, but I mean,
His career fell apart after this, though. I mean, the only thing I ever saw him in after Basic Instinct was playing George's dad on Grey's Anatomy,
Yeah,
where he was also killed off.
I didn't know that. He gets killed a lot. That's kind of his thing.
He dies, and it's because he's got that unhealthy-looking gut.
Oh boy, yeah. But the other guys, other people in this movie, Chelsea Ross, who's the captain, Wayne Knight.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right.
And
hello, Catherine.
Yeah, and my favorite, he has the best lines in the movie and the best delivery. And I got to give Esterhaus credit because the script in this, the dialogue, the back and forth between the actors, and a lot of the credit also just goes to the really, really good acting between the good actors in the movie, all of which are great except Sharon Stone, is the guy who plays Lieutenant Walker, who is like the chief, as we were talking about a couple episodes, the guy who's always reaming out Michael Douglas.
What's his name?
His name is Dennis Arndt, and he basically was not a movie actor and didn't really subsequently do many movies. He was a TV guy. Also did a stint on Grey's Anatomy.
Yep, he played Harper Avery.
And he's just so great in this movie. I don't know. I mean, since it's only the second time you saw it, it's not like a movie you're not really a quoter anyway.
No, I can't quote movies I've seen 1,000 times.
And I'm kind of the opposite. But anyway, he's just got so many great lines. He's so good in this movie. So that's the casting. Now the caster.
Wait, by the way.
Yes.
You mentioned Grey's Anatomy there.
Uh-oh.
You know the black guy, the forensics guy?
Yeah.
I recognized him from one of the best episodes of Grey's Anatomy.
Really?
He's attached to Monica Keena on a pole in that train crash episode. And I'm starting to think Shonda Rhimes, big Basic Instinct fan.
Hey, it's possible.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows? The casting is by a guy who I wrote down his name as soon as the credits came up, before I even thought about the casting, because I knew the guy's name, and I was like, where do I know this guy's name? Well, it's Howard, I don't know how to say his last name, Fire. If it was German pronounced, it'd be Feuer.
Okay.
He cast Silence of the Lambs, The Truman Show, To Die For, Philadelphia, Groundhog Day, The Fisher King, Mississippi Burning, Moonstruck. So this guy's got a long list of things. And the reason I picked those movies is because when you think about those movies, you think about how perfectly cast they are, especially Silence of the Lambs.
I would say Moonstruck, actually.
Yeah.
Underrated. I like that he saw something in Nicolas Cage that some other casting directors hadn't before him.
Yeah, and definitely a Stephen Tobolowsky
Tobolowsky.
Is that really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, connection because of Groundhog Day.
Sure, Ned Ryerson.
Needle Nose Ned the Head. Yeah. So
it's a really good cast, and before we move on, let me just mention the X-Files' Mitch Pileggi.
Who did he play?
He was just one of the internal affairs officers.
Oh, okay.
It's pre-X-Files, so he didn't have a lot to do, but really funny to see him pop up. I do have a note that just says Mitch Pileggi with an exclamation point.
And one more. James Rebhorn.
Yeah, who always great. Independence Day's James Rebhorn.
The Games, James Rebhorn,
Sure.
also with Michael Douglas. Maybe they're buddies. I don't know.
Could be. They're both smarmy weirdos.
Oh, come on.
Look, it's a weird movie. I do like the tone of it, particularly in the first half when it's still more of a crime procedural.
Yeah.
I feel like the movie loses me a little bit after Douglas starts having sex with her. Because in the early going of this movie, it's like a crime procedural, and it feels like a really good one, like early Law and Order or Hill Street Blues or Miami Vice. It feels like very TV, but with better like a better location budget and like a better casting room. You know what I mean?
Okay.
A much better casting room if Sharon Stone's doing what we think she was doing. But I just find Michael Douglas's character so unlikable from Jump Street, and I think he just gets more unlikable after sleeping with Catherine Trammell. And can we just say this is another fucking movie with a hero cop that has shot multiple innocents?
I thought about that.
What is happening?
I don't know. I don't know. It's weird. It is bizarre. I guess
he's known as Shooter. He's being investigated by Internal Affairs. I do think we should sort of. I mean, we're 35 minutes into this podcast, but we should say what the plot of the movie is. Michael Douglas.
Why break precedent?
Yeah, I know, but we should start. He's a cop. And he's being investigated by Internal Affairs for previous incidents. One of the Internal Affairs officers is his girlfriend, played by Jean Triplehorn.
No, she plays his psychiatrist. Sorry.
You're right, but she's connected. Yeah, you're right. His analyst. The analyst.
Right.
Basic Instinct 2. But he's investigating the murder of a rock star named Johnny Boz.
Great name. Joe Esterhaus. Well done.
Yeah, might as well be from that fucking Dennis Leary show on FX. But no, that show's even lazier. Did you know Dennis Leary plays a character on that show named Johnny Rock?
No, I haven't checked that show out.
Horrible.
So Johnny Rock?
Yeah, that's his rock star name, Johnny Rock.
Inside the writer's room.
Yeah. He's a creep too. Anyway, fucking. So Johnny Boz is murdered with an ice pick, and there's this his girlfriend is, or she's, as she says, I was fucking him. I wasn't his girlfriend.
In a very poorly delivered line.
Yeah, I agree. But she's a sort of a romance novelist who has written about a rock star who was murdered with an ice pick by his girlfriend.
Right.
And so the question is whether someone is like a copycat murderer or whether she's using the book as an alibi. Like nobody could be that stupid.
That's right.
Yeah. So that's the movie. So, Douglas and his partner Zunza, what did you say?
Dzunda.
Right. They're investigating Catherine Trammell. And Sharon Stone, holy shit, she's so fucking hot that you just sort of like get the sense that in every scene she's in with Douglas, he's got a raging boner. and eventually they fuck, and she tells him that her next book he's like the main character in it.
Right.
Right.
Now, you said something interesting, which I know is definitely not a minority opinion, but it interests me because why do you find his character, besides obvious things, all right, let's just delve a little deeper. This is definitely deeper than this, the dime store psychology of the movie. Why do you find Nick Curran so unlikable? What about him do you find unlikable?
Well, he's the worst police officer in cinema history, just in terms of doing his job. She is clearly, guilty from the second they meet. I mean, the things he does, like he goes to the club with her in that creepy V-neck.
That was a bad wardrobe choice. Whoever picked that.
To me, that's the worst V in this film. Sharon Stone twerks on him, by the way, in that scene. In early pre-twerking.
I'm sorry, I need a second.
But I also think it's a little bit of the performance by Douglas.
Okay.
And here's my theory on Michael Douglas.
Okay.
I love Wall Street. we'll cover Wall Street on the podcast because there was a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
I think Gordon Gekko killed Michael Douglas's career a little bit.
Wow.
It's a great performance. He was nominated for an Oscar.
And won it. Yeah.
Oh, he won. Okay.
Yes.
And I think all the acclaim for Gordon Gekko affected Michael Douglas in some way to the point where there's a little bit of Gordon Gekko in almost every performance he delivers after that. So there's this inherent layer of smarm in this Michael Douglas performance that keeps me at a distance. Where the whole movie, he's just treating Jean Tripplehorn like shit.
He is.
Ultimately killing her.
Right.
And she's the character I'm rooting for.
Right. Right.
It's a tough movie for me because there's really no one to root for. I'm even like George DeZunda.
Yeah.
Like, I love that character, and then all of a sudden there's this really weird scene that never needed to happen where he's in a cowboy bar, and then they go to a diner together, and he's being, like, drunkenly belligerent for no reason in the diner. Like, everyone in this movie is a dickhead.
Yeah.
And I think Nick Curran's the worst. And I think I almost start to sympathize with Catherine at a certain point.
Oh, wow.
Because Nick is so horrible. Like, Catherine is not a good criminal. She shouldn't get away with this, and she ultimately does with Nick in her bed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's no reason for that. Nick Curran is a horrible police officer and a bad person.
I will go along with that. He's probably a bad person. I don't think he's a horrible police officer. I think he's weak-willed because he lets his libido govern his actions. But it's in the script the way it plays out. He's still figuring a lot of stuff out that only a good cop would do. Just as Sharon Stone.
But he's not telling anybody about it.
But Sharon Stone.
He's using it as ammo to fuck this random blonde lady.
But Sharon Stone's character gives him information specifically for the purpose that she knows he's a good enough cop that he'll figure out where she's going with it, whereas a lesser cop would not. And Jean Tripplehorn says as much. She says directly to him when he thinks that she is the killer, and she says, did she tell you this information in bed, like quietly, And she goes, she knew you'd find out. You're a good cop.
But he's a horrible cop. She does give him information. She says, go search the name Hoberman at this records office. He goes, says Oberman, comes back to Sharon Stone, says, hey, that fucking name you gave me, was that a lie too? And she's like, idiot, I said Hoberman.
But she didn't. She said Oberman.
No, I know, but what an idiot. Like, that's the extent he did. He couldn't have said at the records office any similar names.
All right.
I mean, come on.
I like his character.
He's awful.
I like his character. I think he's just kind of a really good stock tortured cop.
The only time I ever liked him in this entire movie was when he was up late drinking whiskey and watching The Jeffersons.
That was awesome.
I was like, I can relate to that.
Been there, done that.
Yeah. But
that was a great scene. Yeah.
I mean, and he's a guy. He's a recovering alcoholic and a recovering cigarette smoker
and coke addict.
And by the end of the movie, he's just doing all that shit again.
I know, but that's why it's kind of realistic.
Because he's so goddamn weak-willed.
Right. I said that. But that does not make him. See, to me, that doesn't make him unlikable. That does make him a little bit sympathetic.
But he's smacking Tripplehorn around. He basically rapes Jean Tripplehorn at one point in this movie. He rips her clothes in one of those great movie scenes that can't happen in real life because clothes are not built out of what Hulk Hogan makes his shirts out of. But I mean, it's weird, and I hate Nick Curran.
Okay.
Yeah. And to me, the movie falls apart a little bit in the third act, with one exception, because I'm not as interested in the revelations in this movie as I am about the mood. And so I don't care that much. But I
Interesting.
did like the scene where Michael Douglas goes down on Sharon Stone because all I could think about was watch out for that throat cancer, buddy.
Oh God.
Michael Douglas, for our listeners,
Oh,
claimed
God.
that his throat cancer came from going down on Catherine Zeta-Jones too much.
To quote Joe McCarthy, have you no sense of decency, sir?
I'm just saying, he's a smarmy piece of shit, that guy.
Not true.
Yeah.
It's not. He's not. That is not true.
And I do think by the end of the movie, I want Michael Douglas to die, and he doesn't. He ends up with Catherine, and the last scene is them in bed together, and they're sort of together. And I just think that scene's beautifully written and beautifully directed, and the tension is perfect. And it ends with the perfect Hitchcock, like Bernard Herrmann musical sting. I think that last scene is perfect and
Okay.
probably the best part of either of these movies.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Also, by the way, that scene, the very sort of hyped scene where she does cross and uncross her legs,
Yeah. Let's get to that.
that's
first.
actually beautifully written and directed too. I mean, it sounds lurid or whatever,
But you know what's so stupid though? I agree. I said that earlier in the show here. I said that how beautifully it is aesthetically. But the funny part about it is, obviously, by today's standards, that seems nothing. But you still can't even see anything.
no, you can. You can see her fucking vagina.
Not really.
You can.
Really? It's like this blur. I mean, it's bizarre. I don't know.
I don't know
It's-
about your DVD copy, but I watched
Yeah.
this thing on Netflix,
Yeah,
and
it's right there. Huh?
it's right there, man.
Did you read that during the premiere of the?
Thank you for starting to talk, because I was about to make a disgusting comment. Go ahead.
Okay. Well. Did you remember? Did you read the thing that at the premiere she slapped Paul Verhoeven in the face because she was so upset that he actually,
Yeah,
Quote on-
in probably a publicity event scripted
Right.
by Joe Esterhaus.
Yeah, he wrote at this point you'll hit your mark here and slap Paul on the cheek.
Right.
Right. So everyone can see.
Yeah, so this was like really the last hit of Verhoeven's career too.
Oh, was it? Really?
Yeah, I mean after this he did Showgirls, which is a movie I like and was written by Joe Esterhaus, but tanked really badly.
Now
How about Joe Esterhaus? Did you read that interview where someone asked him if he banged Elizabeth Berkley?
I did not.
And he goes, "I was married by that point, so I couldn't touch, but I could still look." What an asshole.
I'm sure he was the monument of fidelity.
Oh, he was on that casting couch. Yeah.
I never saw Showgirls.
It's good. It's good. You should see it. It's good. And then he followed that up with Starship Troopers, which is probably my favorite Paul Verhoeven
That's
film.
awful. I hated
I
it.
love it. I
hate it.
think it's a perfect movie. And then after that, kind of nothing. But that'll be a good segue to Basic Instinct 2, which I guess we should talk about.
Oh boy.
Because he was offered to direct that, and he turned it down to do, his career was not in good shape at this point, and he still decided not to do Basic Instinct 2. He instead did Black Book, which was a smaller independent film.
That's right. I
about
remember when that came
World
out.
War II. It's not great, but it's better than Basic Instinct 2.
What isn't?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, though, we should, on our 5-star scale, what do you give Basic Instinct?
Well, I'm giving the movie 5 stars.
See, this is where our scale is flawed, because
Any rating scale.
no,
is-
of course,
yeah,
but
right.
5-star. One of the things we say about the 5-star rating is it's in the conversation for best movie in the series, and so by that scale, it gets 5 stars because
Sure.
it's so much better than Basic Instinct 2.
Right.
But if we're saying just as a movie, I'll give it 4 because I have some major problems with it.
I would give it 4 as well, but I'm going to give it 5.
Okay, fair enough.
And I'm surprised you're giving it 4.
I like the movie a lot. I have issues with it, but those first 2/3 of it are just taut, great Paul Verhoeven action. It's like a great crime procedural with just spikes of insanity, like Paul Verhoeven insanity, like gore
Right.
and sex and
Right.
weirdness. and it's got great performances, except by Sharon Stone.
Right.
I have problems with Michael Douglas, and I have problems with Nick Curran more than I have problems with Michael Douglas. I think.
And I just real quick, the thing that you said about Michael Douglas is interesting, that he couldn't shake you couldn't shake, or you think he couldn't shake the greedy kind of smarmy aspect, because he does go on to play in a couple other movies, like in The Game and in what am I thinking of?
Wall Street Money Never Sleeps.
Yeah, War of the Roses. Like he plays.
Yeah.
But I don't think he has. I think he's still very able to pull off kind of the vulnerable human being, everyman quality in movies like Falling Down and
I don't. I
and
think
Wonder Boys. And I feel that he can still pull that out. And Solitary Man. I mean, I don't.
I think there's a total air of smarminess to him in Solitary Man.
Yeah. Okay, but he's not an evil, I don't
think he's always evil. I just think there's a layer of Gordon Gekko on Michael Douglas that he was never able to shake off.
But you also just don't like Michael Douglas.
I like Michael Douglas.
You don't like him as a person.
No, he's a bad person. But I think he's a good actor, and I love things like The War of the Roses. I oddly think the only movie after Wall Street where he ever came across like an everyman, oddly, was the one where he played the president in the American President.
I don't think he's a bad person. I mean, from what I've read interviews, he seems like a cool guy. And in the like behind the scenes extras of like Black Rain and Wall Street, his interviews are really interesting. He's got really interesting stuff to say. He's very smart.
I never said he's uninteresting or unsmart.
And he's like a humanitarian who's put a lot of money into good stuff. I don't mean to sound like a roll call here. I'm not, whatever. But I disagree. I don't think.
Once you're blaming your throat cancer on your wife's pussy, I'm out on you.
I think he immediately regretted that idiotic.
But who says that?
Yeah.
Who says that in private, let alone in public?
It's a good point. I can't defend that. No need to. Yeah.
All right, so
it's retarded.
Let's move on to Basic Instinct 2. This is a movie that sort of threatened to happen for a while.
Oh.
And ultimately it did in 2006. I think it was supposed to happen in 2000, and then there were like legal issues.
Yeah.
One of the things was Coralco had folded by this point.
For sure.
It's the only case I can remember where instead of a studio desperately trying to get an actor to appear in a sequel, this is a case of an actor desperately trying to get a studio to make a sequel.
Yeah.
Sharon Stone really wanted to play Catherine Trammell again.
Obviously.
And she sort of shepherded this project.
Well, and then let me preface this review of this movie by a note that I made. I think it's the best note I made on this particular one. You ready? I wrote, before I watched Basic Instinct 2, I made a note that I wrote, they should have made a movie of one of Catherine Trammell's shitty books. And guess what, folks? They did.
Yeah, that's basically what this is, right? She writes a book, The Annals.
I mean, it's not, but this is probably worse than one of the books she wrote.
And it's so badly directed, and the attention to detail is so bad. Think about, we see the novels that she's written in that first movie.
Yeah.
And they look like real romance novels of that.
Yeah,
era.
they look like garbage. Like they were realistic.
Yeah,
she writes garbage.
This was insane, and it's even more insane to think like 14 years later she's still pulling this shit, and it's because she has a risk addiction. And I think the worst thing about this movie is that it specifically diagnoses Catherine.
Yeah,
like making her super unscary. It's like that. The Rob Zombie Halloween movie where there are flashbacks to like child Michael Myers like killing animals, where it's like Michael Myers is a sociopath. No, it's scary when he's just like the boogeyman.
Exactly.
But once you diagnose a great movie villain, then she's not scary anymore.
Yeah, I agree.
And she's weird in this movie. It's a really uncomfortable movie to watch.
It is.
I think it's just gross.
It is gross.
And And it's also just unrealistic that everyone who meets Catherine immediately wants to fuck her still, because
Yeah.
Sharon Stone is 48 years old when they made this movie.
Whoa.
And
whoa.
look, and she's not a good enough actor. Like, she got by in that first movie on charisma and sexiness. She's no longer that charismatic. She's no longer that sexy. If you're a good actor,
right,
as an older lady, you can portray that.
Well,
when you watch Ocean's 13,
Ellen Barkin.
Ellen Barkin is so goddamn sexy in that movie.
Yeah.
But
okay, yeah.
You know, Sharon Stone's not good enough to play this role as a 48-year-old.
48 is not old, but she just doesn't. You're right. You that was well put. Yeah, because I was going to say Charlotte Rampling for some reason is in this movie, and when she did this, she was like 60 years old, and she's sexier with the raise of an eyebrow than Sharon Stone is at any point.
I
in this
agree
movie.
with that, and all the dialogue is just she's talking about cocks and pussies and
awful.
Do you want to take me from behind on
It
your
is
knees?
awful.
It's gross.
It is so
Disgusting.
bad.
They say "cum" in that first movie like once. They talk about coming in this movie so much. Like in that opening movie, like she should say like the movie opens with a high-speed car chase for no reason, and a dude fingering Catherine, and she should say to the cop later, it's so much sexier if she says he was fingering me, but she says he was making me come. Like, oh. Fucking gross.
And this was directed by, they finally landed on Michael Caton Jones.
Sure. Who was a thing in the 90s, but kind of wasn't anymore.
Right. Now, I was looking at his filmography. I loved one movie he did and liked another one, and the rest I didn't see, but are still pretty famous. I didn't read
real movies, unlike
exactly. The one that I loved, and it's probably not one of your favorites because it's not really your type of thing, but, you know, I love those epic historical things. I loved Rob Roy.
Yeah, well, it's like 2 hours too long.
Yeah, and I really liked the probably little scene, but I really liked City by the Sea with Robert De Niro. He did
Never saw it.
Yeah,
so this movie is not without pedigree.
No.
It was also co-written by Henry Bean.
Yeah, I saw that.
Who wrote The Believer, which is great.
And Internal Affairs, which is another cop movie, which I really liked. With one of Richard Gere's best performances.
And Noise, which is kind of underrated.
I never saw it.
Yeah, it's pretty good. This came out March 31st, 2006. Sort of not that much fanfare, as I recall. But, I mean, they spent money on it. It's not like they just shit this movie out. They hired million. Michael Caton Jones. I think it was offered to John McTiernan at one point, too.
Yeah, it was.
Speaking of fucking Die Hard. and it cost $70 million to make. They spent $70 million on this movie. That's not a small amount of money.
No.
And it only made 38 worldwide. It tanked. You want to hear a fun fact about
Absolutely.
this? Great. This is great for the franchise. This is the first theatrical sequel in the history of Hollywood not to debut at least $10 million at the box office.
Is that right?
Yeah, it really is. Like, you know, obviously franchises are much more rampant today, but this was the first case of Hollywood trying to turn a movie into a franchise and it failing.
Yeah. Well, can I ask you a question? Probably one of the main reasons, besides the movie being an unbelievable piece of shit, which I actually wrote as a note. I remember when this came out, I could have cared less. I had no interest at all.
Well, I don't know if I'd seen Basic Instinct at the time.
But I mean, like, I loved Basic Instinct by that point, and I had zero interest, and I don't know if that's because, you know, why is there a sequel to this? You know, which also ties in with the franchise, our whole podcast idea. You know, like, shouldn't I have been interested in this?
But
I wasn't.
It seemed weird. That's why, and that's the only reason why, because that first movie ends really beautifully, I think, with such a great Hitchcock ending. And, you know, Hitchcock movies never got sequels.
Right.
And, I mean, Verhoeven's
unless
not
we do
back.
Psycho.
The movie ends with... Yeah, that's true. Jesus. There was also a TV movie sequel to The Birds in the 90s.
Oh.
But, you know, Nick Curran ends up with Catherine Trammell in that film. And so it just seems so weird. 14 years later, Sharon Stone no longer a movie star, Paul Verhoeven not directing this movie, Michael Douglas nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
Like, there just should never have been a sequel to Basic Instinct, and if there was going to be one, they should have done it like a couple years later. Michael Douglas had to be in it, and it would have had to be some kind of Bonnie and Clyde style movie.
Yeah, that's a good point. That would have been cool. So I would have tuned into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I was just looking at my notes here, and I saw that. Just real quick, going back to the Sharon Stone aspect of the sequel, I read Manohla Dargis's review at the time, and she talks about she talks about how awful it is, and she says something like, you know, Sharon Stone has famously said she never got plastic surgery, but, and I quote, "Man, does she look weird here," end quote.
She looks like a different person. She really does. She's unrecognizable. It was so weird watching Basic Instinct 2 the day after watching Basic Instinct.
Yeah, yeah.
She looks bizarre. She sounds bizarre. It's a horrible performance.
And this movie's another one that's got a couple of good actors in it. You know, David Thewlis shows up, and you got
David Thewlis and Sharon Stone are the only actors committing to this film, though. They're committing to the tone of it, and Sharon Stone's giving a bad performance.
Right.
So
yeah,
David Thewlis is the only good performance in this movie.
You're right. He's all in.
Yeah.
Charlotte Rampling, who's pretty much incapable of being bad, is definitely half asleep, and David Morrissey is
abominable.
Oh my god!
And he's a good actor.
Yeah, he is. Whoa! I don't know
Can I ask you seriously? Like, you do research on these? Why does this movie take place in Scotland?
I don't know.
It doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
She seems weird there. I don't know why she has an apartment. True. I don't know where Nick is. He gets brought up weirdly in one scene as like
I like when
reference.
The only time, one of the times she brings him up, she mispronounces his name.
I noticed that too. She says Karan.
Yeah, that was so funny. It's like, wow, Sharon, is that you not knowing the previous? I mean, how does she not remember? Sharon Stone doesn't remember.
That's very surprising to me because I would think that in the 5 years leading up to Basic Instinct 2, Sharon Stone basically did nothing but sit in her big Hollywood house and watch Basic Instinct.
Yeah, so she should know the names of the characters. Yeah, that was really bizarre. It was not something I thought I would even, but it was so obvious. She's like, Nick Curran.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
I think she's just weird in this movie, and I think it doesn't all come down to Sharon Stone. I think the script has it has a fundamental misunderstanding of who Catherine Trammell is as a character.
Yeah,
and I also think there's a weird runner in this movie where the cops keep calling her like a bitch and a cunt.
Yeah,
and that's not a thing in the first one. Like,
no,
she's a suspect. Like they respect her. They think she's guilty.
Well, that's part of the
there's
charm.
Like a weird misogynistic streak in Basic Instinct.
Well, that's part of the charm of the first movie is that there's all these men in the movie, and she is a sexual object, but she's absolutely like the toughest character. And I'm not saying that to be cliche. She totally is. Like, she's intimidating. You know, they do respect her, especially even the captain who doesn't even, he reluctantly brings her in for questioning, you know, and apologizes to her afterwards, you know. In this movie, it's just, yeah, she's automatically just a bitch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She gets called the fucking C word like 5 minutes into this movie. Yeah. Like, she hasn't even done anything yet.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, Thewlis just wants to, no pun intended, just wants to nail her.
Yeah, and, everyone does, though. David Morrissey calls her a bad name really early, and I think even Hugh Dancy, by the way.
Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, a great actor. I audibly groaned when they killed him off really early because it was just nice to have him around.
And showed his body like for a really long time in different cuts. Did you notice how long his dead body is in frame?
Yeah.
It's like
That was one of the better scenes in the movie. Actually, the film pops a little bit every
Really?
time it's just Thulis and Morrissey chatting. I feel like Thulis raises Morrissey's game a little bit.
I think you're being reactive to.
Well,
how
I think
bad-
I was
yeah.
just looking for anything to hang on to.
Right, and I wasn't. I couldn't. This made A Good Day to Die Hard look like Lawrence of fucking Arabia. I couldn't.
It
was
is.
just-
It's significantly worse than A Good Day to Die Hard.
It's just. I mean, this is below Lifetime Movie of the Week.
Yeah.
Hard. I mean, it's.
By the way, really lazy Bruce Willis, still better actor than Sharon Stone trying.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I mean, it's just there's no. I mean, the lack of subtlety, and I say this from a
Yes.
sequel to a Paul Verhoeven film.
Yeah, you're right.
I love the scene. There's that. I mean, I don't love the scene, but there's that sort of rapey scene in the first one with Michael Douglas having sex with Gene Triplehorn real hard. And the movie trusts the audience to know, oh, he's thinking about Catherine.
Right. In this one, yeah, I know
In
what
this
you're saying.
one,
He's
he
staring
takes
at
a
her.
girl home, like fucks her real hard, and he happens to have like the book jacket of Catherine's book just looking at him, and
Yeah.
they show him just like watching a headshot of Sharon
Yeah,
Stone, and
yeah.
it's like, oh, he's thinking about her.
Right. Yeah.
Boop. Yeah, I mean, come on, dude. And
Yeah.
also, for the first time, we get to hear snippets of Catherine's writing.
Oh
and
my God.
that cuts that character down at the knees. 'Cause
That is-
the
you're right.
second we hear her writing portrayed, and we have to, she's a terrible writer.
It's confirmed.
It's
She's a
yeah,
terrible
we
writer.
don't need to know. We can pretend she's a good writer in that
Right,
first movie
right.
because she's
We-
smart.
Right. Now it's like, yeah, we had all evidence to show she's already a bad writer, but this is just, what is this doing? What is this trying to tell us about her writing? It's just, is that just more laziness, just to be like, just scope it out for us to have her read from her book because
Yeah.
it takes up some screen time?
I think so. They go for a Hitchcock ending in this too, and there's no Hitchcock vibe in this movie at all. Except, Goldsmith's score. I mean, the snippets that they use in this movie
Yeah.
seems totally out of place because it's
Yeah, it
so
does.
tonally different from the first one.
That's right. Yeah.
And they go for a Hitchcock ending in this one where it's almost like I wouldn't hurt a fly. Like, and she goes to visit. She drives him to be in a mental hospital, and she goes to visit him and explain like the plot of the movie, basically.
Right.
And I mean,
That's
there's
a
just
good point. That's another Psycho reference where it's explained at the end.
works in Psycho.
Of course,
Yeah.
but in this, it's like, oh, here's what happened, folks.
It's
I'm gonna-
like in Psycho if Norman Bates explained to the camera why he did what he did.
whilst wearing the wig of
Right,
his dead
right.
mother. Yeah, he just right into the camera. Maybe break the fourth wall.
So
and yeah,
yeah. So let's wrap up a little
Yeah,
bit.
sure.
I mean, so Basic Instinct 2, there will never be a sequel to this movie because it tanked so bad. I think maybe the original Basic Instinct, just because the age we live in, will get a remake at some point. And I think that movie is going to have Catherine Trammell as more of like a slasher, and the death count will be higher. That's my prediction.
that's a very interesting and bold prediction. It very well could be remade. I have no reason. Why? But-
Well, no, it's not going to be a good movie, and there's going to be no reason for it. But I think it's going to happen.
Yep, that's true.
And I'm going to call my shot here. It's going to be produced by Michael Bay's production company, Platinum Dunes.
Good call.
But Sharon Stone has said she wants to direct a third Basic Instinct
Yeah, I
movie.
saw that.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Let's. That's enough of a joke. We don't even need to comment on it. So
Yeah.
you give this movie a 1 on the 5-star rating, I assume?
Obviously.
Yeah.
Are we not doing no stars? Is that not?
No. 1's the lowest. We'll give it a
Okay.
1.
It's 1. I didn't do a superhero count. There's none in Basic Instinct 2, but there is 1 in Basic Instinct. Did you catch it?
No.
Michael Douglas.
Oh, sure, Ant-Man. Yeah, yeah, he's Henry Pym. But I will say comic book character count, because I've started doing this because of you.
Okay.
In Basic Instinct 2, David Morrissey, the governor in The Walking
Sure.
Dead, as well as David Thewlis, not a comic book per se, but kind of a superhero, Professor Lupin in the Harry Potter franchise.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing it.
All right. Go ahead. Go for it. So
yeah.
you're obviously giving it a 1.
I'm giving it a 1. We didn't do MVP, LVP for the first one. How about right now?
I'm going to give MVP in the first movie to Howard Foyer, the casting director.
Interesting. Well, I was thinking more actors.
Oh.
Because I'll give it to fucking Paul Verhoeven.
Okay,
But,
because I could also give it to Jerry Goldsmith.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No,
Okay,
I was
fine.
going to go triple horn. You can go Douglas if you want.
Yeah, I'm going to go Michael Douglas, but I'd like to also really, it's a close one because Gene Triplehorn is so good.
Fantastic.
Can I give a tie?
Yeah, why not? Who gives a shit?
Yeah, tie MVP, Michael Douglas / Gene Triplehorn.
Um,
LVP, Sharon Stone.
I'll go LVP that Roxy, her lesbian lover.
She
who-
is way better than Sharon Stone.
But
in
it's such an... I don't like the character. And it
You don't
leads-
like any of the characters.
and it leads to a car chase. There's a couple of car chases in that first Basic Instinct, and it smacks of Joe Esterhaas, like his sort of mainstream Hollywood thinking. Like, this needs an action beat here.
Right.
Yeah, I don't like them. But MVP, LVP in the second one, I'll go MVP David Thewlis.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to give it to Charlotte Rampling because it was nice to see
Yeah,
her.
fine.
Yeah, Charlotte Rampling.
Fine.
LVP, Sharon Stone.
I almost want to give it to David Morrissey because he's such a bad lead, and I know
Yeah.
he can act, so it's frustrating.
There you go. That's a good
Yeah,
choice. Yeah, my LVPs are pretty easy. I'm a little surprised you didn't give it to Sharon Stone. You shit on her so much in the first one.
I think she's good. She's good casting, if nothing else. She's not delivering a great performance in the first one, but she's a good screen presence.
Mm-hmm.
And in the second one, she's just terrible. But I think it's just, the only reason to make a Basic Instinct 2 is for Sharon Stone to be in it. So maybe I should give it to Sharon Stone because the movie wouldn't exist if she didn't.
Thank you.
All right. So let's wrap up here.
Yep.
They should never have made a Basic Instinct 2.
No,
This is a great case of that.
it is a great case of that.
And
One of the best cases we'll come across, I'd say.
I think so. It's such a ridiculously unnecessary sequel, and America and indeed the world agreed by not going to see it.
Yeah, sure.